Well, good morning. I'm Tim Sheehy, president of the MMAC, and welcome to the business of Metro Milwaukee. The webinar's purpose is to provide insights on the region's economy to help you make better business connections. This program is sponsored by United Healthcare. MMAC has partnered with United Healthcare to make it easier to find a plan that works for your employees and your bottom line. United Healthcare's plan offers coverage for companies with 2 to 130 employees, allowing smaller mid-sized companies to take advantage of coverage that's typically reserved for larger companies, like underwriting for more competitive pricing, better data so you know where your premium dollars are going, and a potential surplus if claims are lower than expected. Plus, access to critical illness, accident protection, and hospital indemnity plans to provide further financial security for your employees. In short, it's a great benefit plan to help you recruit and retain talent in this challenging environment. And the best plug I can give this program comes from the 633 employers who are enrolled and the 21,000 employees and dependents that are utilizing the benefits. So if you're interested, contact an MMAC affiliated broker or contact MMAC and visit mmAC.org to learn more. Today's program is really focused on the biggest challenge we hear about from our members, and that's their need to fill job openings. If you think about it, regional employment here in Metro Milwaukee peaked at about 871,000 before the pandemic. Through the pandemic, the region experienced a loss of 113,000 of those jobs. And the latest report shows that we've recovered about 80% or 91,000 of those jobs. But the biggest barrier to fully recovering that employment is not the lack of openings, but it's the inability to fill them. If we look at just the top 10 job openings, they account for 24,000 open jobs. So as we work with our members, employers really draw from 4 distinct pools to meet their labor needs. First, of course, is the K-16 talent pipeline. Whether you're hiring out of high school or from a 2-year or 4-year degree, it's an important part of filling our workforce and labor needs. The second is the work that companies do to upskill their current talent, to move them down the path as they continue to innovate and add technology to their businesses. The third is recruiting and retaining talent that's here in the region, but it's not currently in the workforce. And the fourth pool is recruiting out of market, people who don't live in the Metro Milwaukee area who companies want to recruit here to take employment. So MMAC has a broad set of strategies to help our members in each of these pools. What we want to do today is to highlight an initiative that's led by 125 employers who have committed to sharing best practices in a collaborative effort to improve their recruitment, retention, and advancement of diverse talent with a focus on Black and Brown talent. And there's a reason for that. Metro Milwaukee, compared to 20 peer regions, has the widest gap in its engagement of and employment of diverse talent. So joining me here to discuss this today in our Region of Choice initiative are MMAC's Executive Vice President, Julie Granger, and Corry Biddle, Vice President of Community Affairs, both of whom are lead staff on this effort to support employers. I also want to note for those watching that for the first time publicly, we're going to report the progress we've made since 2018 on this really important initiative. So Julie, before we get into the numbers and kind of where we are, and Corry Joe, why don't we start with just a little background, and Julie, help us understand what's the ROC initiative and why did it come to fruition?
Sure. As you just mentioned, Tim, this is an effort that we've been working on for 4 years now. So we started back in 2018 when our board and our membership made it very clear that the inequities in our region were having a very negative impact on the region's economy, on the community, and on their companies as well. So we've branded this as the Region of Choice Initiative, and I think it's important to include for all. Too often we hear that there are two Milwaukees that exist. One where there's prosperity and one where there is not for certain populations. So this is an effort really to close some of those racial disparity gaps that the region experiences very acutely. And as you mentioned, when we compare Milwaukee to 20 of our peer regions on any number of prosperity indicators from household income to home ownership and educational attainment, Milwaukee really falls at the bottom of that list. And also when you look at the inequity in terms of overall prosperity, the gap between our white populations, our African-American population, and our Latino is the greatest when you look at what's happening in Milwaukee versus those other communities. So that's what was really behind the driving force of launching this initiative. And we took a look at what can the business community really do to close some of these gaps. We're an association of employers. And I think what we can do best is really bring those employers together to collaborate on solutions. So this is one great example of that. And we started out with about 60 employers engaged in the effort. And as of today, we have 125 companies that not only are engaging in the effort, but they've made a public commitment to change. So and that change has to do with representation and the percentage of the workforce overall that is Black and brown, and then the percentage of the management workforce that is Black and brown.
So Julie did a great job, Corry Joe, of outlining why this is important to employers and why they're doing it. In addition to your other roles here, you also kind of oversee the Fuel Network, a large, diverse group of talent in the Milwaukee area. Why is the Region of Choice effort important to employees or to the talent that's here in the region?
I think opportunity and representation through opportunity and wealth that we have here and economic development. If it's not being dispersed in an equitable way and people aren't feeling included, it contributes to brain drain, which has continued to be an issue for so many metropolitan cities. When we look at the numbers of generations, though, the different element that we look at is this next pool of talent, Gen Z. Right now, they're between 10 years old and 25. So only a small percentage of them are in the workforce. But this generation is more diverse than ever. For the first time, there is a cohort, a generational cohort that is less than 50% white. So increasingly, our talent and our future leaders are people of color. And if there aren't pathways and opportunities for those people to advance within companies and find themselves or see themselves in the region, building a life, building a career, feeling truly included, numbers wise, we have a problem in terms of who we're hiring and who's running our companies.
So Julie, talk a little bit about how this works from an employer standpoint. What's the advantage of being part of this rock collective, if you will, and it's open to any company? So what have we been doing, or what have the companies been doing to help share best practices?
Sure. So we do have 125 companies participating, and they range anywhere from small to mid-size to the largest companies here in the region. So anybody can participate, and we have a great representation from diverse industries and company sizes. And what we have tried to do is bring those employers together, knowing that within that group, there are some that are, much further along on the journey and have been at this effort, some for 20 plus years, and others that are, just now saying this is something that we need to pay a lot more attention to, and it's going to really determine the health and future of our company. So what can we learn from the participants within the group? And we're seeing some great examples of, companies being able to share what they've learned in the last 10, 20 years and the resources that they've been able to engage and tap into, and then turn around and share that with others in this cohort. And so the learning that can take place there has been very valuable. And then one of the things that we try to bring to the table is, through surveys and other connections with these companies, we're learning what their needs are. And sometimes we're bringing in outside resources as well to share with them.
Yeah, and Corry Joe, again, we've done a lot of work with employers, but I think one of the unique things about this initiative is kind of going directly to the voice of the customer, right? The diverse talent that's here in the region. Can you talk a little bit about some of the survey and focus groups that we've done with the diverse talent here, and what you see kind of are the pluses and what are the challenges?
Yeah, I think, 4 years ago when we started this, we had a pretty robust process that included the voice of the customer and the talent and their view and experience in the gaps of opportunity or advancement. We even have now a culture survey that is a complement to the region of choice numbers. And that culture survey really gets at the employee's experience in the workplace. Are you feeling included? Do you have opportunities for advancement? Is it an inclusive place? Employers have a lot of control over that, shifting the culture, changing that within their companies. I think what's really interesting is when we ask the question about their experience in Milwaukee, their experience living as a person in the region. So the culture survey gets at that 9-to-5 work experience, but what's happening once you get off of work and your experience in the community? Are you feeling at home here? And so there's been some really great feedback, some positive, and letting us know that talent is feeling like the employers are making more of an effort, a concerted effort, a genuine effort. Overall, employees are saying, yep, we see it. We can see the changes that are being made. We feel it, we see it, and they acknowledge it. But they've also been pretty candid about some of the struggles of living in a community that feels disjointed or segregated, that they aren't quite feeling welcome in every segment, every piece of what a Milwaukee lifestyle is. So that's challenging, but it gives us something to respond to, and it gives us an opportunity to enhance their experience in a way that we hope will become organic and authentic. But if, until it gets there, we have some control over providing experiences that make them feel more at home and included.
Yeah. And Corry, Joe, it's a very robust group. You did some, survey of some 1,200 people. So from, 100 or plus companies. So it's not just a small subset. This is a really good database that Milwaukee can pay attention to.
Yeah. And it's 1,200 managers. So presumably these are people who have a pretty good quality of life and are having a decent experience and have advanced to a point in their company. Some might say they're having some of the best experiences and the best access to our assets. And they gave us some pretty honest feedback, which was, diverse across race, and the experiences are different across race, but there have been some consistent through lines, regardless of age, race, about the fact that there needs to be more inclusion in terms of the culture of Milwaukee as a community, what it feels like when you walk into places, the fact that there's, white and Black and Hispanic parts of town that, are these invisible lines that we all sort of acknowledge and know and adhere to, but it's hurtful to a lot of people. And we gave them an opportunity to voice that and explain why, which, gives us a real opportunity to tackle that.
Great. Sorry, Julie, I cut off there.
There were actually 82% of respondents across all of the races said that within the last year, their companies were doing more to at least communicate the intentionality behind creating more diverse and inclusive workplaces. And a lot of the comments we heard was, that's great that my company is recognizing this as an issue and they're saying they want to do something about it. There's still a lot of room for improvement, and some of it's going to take time to show action behind the intention. And so a lot of the calls we heard from the managers were for transparency around the actions that are being taken, and then just measuring the results.
So Julie, can you, and I want to bury the lead here, we're going to get to the data so Chris can get ready to cue that up, but can you talk about what's required of a company to participate in the region of choice?
Yeah, it's very simple, really. I mean, what they're doing is they are actually signing a document that says they are pledging to release their employment data by race to the MMAC confidentially. And then what we do is we aggregate that data and report it on an annual basis. So they're agreeing to provide that information to the MMAC. And in addition to that, then they're agreeing to actively participate in the ongoing best practice sharing sessions. And as the leader of the organization, the CEO, we are asking that they too participate annually in a best practice sharing and, just a very transparent discussion around what's working and frankly, what's not.
Yeah. So again, the data that you're about to take us through comes from roughly 125 employers that have 120,000 employees here in Metro Milwaukee. So this is for those larger ones, it's a snapshot of their global or national employment footprint. And for those that are here in the region, it may capture their entire employment base.
Yes, but importantly, we are just looking at Metro Milwaukee. So even if they're a large global company, for example, we're just looking at the subset of their employment that exists here in the region.
So why don't, Chris, if you will, why don't you put the data up and then have Julie kind of walk us through the data, which really goes back to 2018 when we established the baseline upon which we're measuring the growth. And I think we've taken this adage to heart here that you can't manage what you can't measure. So we put a premium on kind of measuring where we are. And Julie, why don't you just walk us through the numbers here so people can see what's on the screen?
Sure. So, in the first line chart there, what you can see is the actual numbers of employees, right? So we've got a total base that we're looking at in 2021 of 127,000, almost 128,000 overall employees. And the net change. And then we're looking again at the African-American population and the Hispanic Latino population. So you can see the actual numbers of employees there broken out. And then when you look at the bottom graph, it's important to note that what we are really measuring here is the percent change, increase or decrease, because we know that employment is going to fluctuate over time. When we started this initiative, I think no one in the world yet was thinking ahead that we may have a pandemic and that employment is going to fluctuate rather dramatically. So what we started with was a percentage of overall workforce of 15.4% of Black and Brown employment combined. And by 2021, for the data that was reported, that population is making up 17.3% of the overall workforce. And that represents a percent change of 12.3%. So our goal there, again, is within the 5-year period to reach 15% increase. And so tracking, over the last 4 years, if we remain on that kind of trajectory, we will in fact hit that goal.
Right. And while it would seem there's a lag in data, this data is really reported at the end of a year. So we don't get 22's data to make it obvious until 22 is completed. So yes, this is the most current data that we have. And when 22 is completed, we'll have that in 23 and report that out.
Right. Right. So we really won't know, our final numbers until 24.
Next
Chris,
slide.
do you want to? So here what we're doing is looking at the change in management employees. And the reason we broke this out really was to emphasize management really gets at one of the key underlying goals of this initiative, which is to say that as people advance into leadership positions, they have more influence within their company and more leadership capabilities. And it's a very important indicator along with overall employment. So that's why we really broke the goal out into these two segments. So again, at the top, what we're looking at there are actual numbers of managers. So for total management employment, about 17.5, and what the increase has been over the last 3 years. And then for the African-American and Latino and Hispanic. And then on the bottom part of the chart, again, we're measuring the percent increase. And so we have seen that change from 2018 at 6.9% up to 8.7%, which already represents a 26% increase in the number of total management. So right now we have already reached the goal of 25%, and we're optimistic at this point that we are going to continue to exceed that goal.
So a couple questions, just so everybody's clear on here. This data is inclusive of the companies that have signed the region of choice commitment. It's not all of the companies in the region, right? So it's just the region of choice. And this is the growth from the baseline that we established in 2018.
Correct.
So we collected the 2018 data, that's the baseline. Julie, I don't mean to throw a question at you that you don't have in front of you, but if we look at the chart that's up here, I think it will help with perspective. If you can share with us with management, and then we can go back to employment, but on the management end, how does the growth in the percentage increase for the region of choice companies compare with all the companies in the region that report this data through the EEOC? And then the same for the total employment.
Yeah, so obviously part of what we want to measure here is, this is kind of the control group that we have, the companies that have made the commitment and are intentionally driving toward this goal, and comparing that to the group that you're talking about, Tim, all the companies in the region that report their data in through the EEOC. So those would be all companies with more than 100 employees. And what we found in that comparison is if you're looking at the management employees, that 26% increase across 4 years compares to only a 1.6% increase in the EEOC companies.
So again, for all the companies in the region that reported to the EEOC, the percentage growth was 1.6. The ROC group, 26%.
Correct.
And then for overall employment,
looking for the data here, Tim, give me a second.
The EEOC data for overall is 1.7
versus 12.3 for the ROC group.
That's right.
So
Tim, I'm sorry, I misspoke. On the management side, it's 26% compared to 6%.
Got it. Great. And 26 against 6, and the 12.3 against 1.7. So it's too flipped to say there's a cause and effect here. But it is interesting to note that these companies that are participating, sharing best practices, working collaboratively, and doing the work through the surveys are progressing further than other companies in the region. So we are doing something right here.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the power of intention. And the focus on this is really, I think it somewhat proves the model that this initiative and the pledge, the best practice sessions, the sharing of information, and re-looking at the practices around hiring and advancement of talent with a lens of equity makes a difference in the choices and the decisions that employers are making.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned up front again, if you have questions, feel free to populate the chat or the Q&A. We're happy to respond to them. And I just want to take a moment here to recognize both Julie and Corry Joe for the work that they've done on this. And, importantly, I go back to 2018 when we kind of put a stake in the ground, and Jonas Priesing, who's the chairman and CEO of Manpower Group, was very clear and very determined that we would report this data out regardless of the progress we made or didn't make. And we're staying true to that. And Kathy Jacobson, who's MMAC's current chair and the CEO of Freighter Health, has continued that commitment. And so we're not standing here to pick a line from George Bush on the aircraft carrier saying mission accomplished. We're standing here saying we've made progress. We have a lot more room to grow. and we want to stay at this and continue to learn. So having said all that, both question to you, Julie and Corey, Joe, what comes next? What can we expect next? Again, this is a journey. This isn't a finished product. And even when we get to 2025, we're not going to wrap this up and say we're done. So what comes next, and what can people expect looking ahead, both the companies and employees?
I'm really excited that in the new year, we're going to start more focus on providing a different cultural experience for the employees. A lot of our work so far has really been dedicated to the at-work experience. The employers, DEI, HR, all of those folks have a community of practice and passion and support for each other. We want to provide the same thing for the talent, the kinds of talent that responded to our culture survey and beyond. And our thinking about it really is, we can take their feedback and say, okay, your experience in Milwaukee has been that you don't feel included in cultural aspects or festivities, or you don't feel comfortable necessarily enjoying all of the assets that are a part of Milwaukee. We learned through Fuel, though, that as a group and as a community, you can create that culture and you can create inclusion and a feeling of acceptance in a way that will become organic over time. So we're looking to do the same thing, something very similar with the rock talent. And so this is all of the rock talent with a focus on the African-American and Hispanic and Latino experience, lifting up those cultural experiences in the city for everyone to enjoy and celebrate at a really high level. So a lot of programming coming on that end. I'm excited about that.
And let me just ask, there are a couple of really good questions in here. I think I know the answers, but you're the experts. So the question is, do we have breakdowns of the statistics by type of employment? For example, IT positions.
We do. I mean, we can pull that information by industry, and I think that is something that we would like to go back to the consortium, because what they have agreed to is reported in complete aggregate, and I think what we'd want to do is just make sure that the companies participating are okay with us releasing that information.
So we might have it by industry, Julie, based on the company, but I'm not sure we would have it by position.
Correct. We do not have it by position. Yeah. We've asked companies to report management in general.
Right. So we could look at healthcare, we could look at manufacturing, we could look at IT as an industry, but we don't have the cross-cutting data of IT positions in every industry. That's not something we've pulled. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I did want to add to what Corey Joe was saying.
Sure.
On the employer side. We will be having our second annual Region of Choice Summit in early June, and that's a half-day event where we bring everybody together, and it's not a requirement that you be a Region of Choice company, that you've signed the pledge. I think there's some great learnings that can happen there that are really applicable to any company that's interested in this topic, no matter where they are on the journey.
And a second really good question. Has any data been collected on the effect on companies with increased diversity, profitability, employee engagement?
So I'm aware of a lot of studies and data that exist nationally. I know McKinsey and Mercer, we've had both of those organizations in to speak to our rock companies about just that. What are the actual economic benefits and impact of initiatives like this? We have not looked at that specifically for these 125 companies, but we know from studies going back decades that there is a positive correlation between how diverse a company is in terms of their employees and how decisions get made and the impact of those decisions on the bottom line.
And I should have asked the question up front too. The Region of Choice seminar that you just identified, as well as other information, there's a website that people can go to find both the case studies and the information, as well as other things that you presented. And where is that?
said region of choice, MKE. I'll pull it and I'll drop it into the chat box now.
Perfect. And I think, as we've learned, in addition to the data that you cited, Julie, and it's not anecdotal, if companies here are having a challenge filling job openings, this is just additive. I mean, in addition to it being the right thing to do and a good thing for the community, it also makes really good business sense. The more you can be an attractive employer, and Corry Joe's used the word sticky before, that you can, get people to stay and grow with your company, the better off you're going to be. So this is a good effort there. There's a question here. Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, Tim, there's a related effort that we are just now engaging in with recruiters. So we've launched a recruiters roundtable, and it's, very, very much connected to the work that we're doing here, but certainly, beyond just Black and Brown talent. And it's not too late. We have our second meeting of that group tomorrow morning. And if you want to sign up to see what that's all about, it's on MMAC.org.
Then the question here, and it's true for other people of color, there's a question here about when Asian and Pacific Islander employees and management stats will be included.
So we started this effort as we started the conversation today, Tim, really focusing on where the disparities are the greatest in our region. And when we look at that from an economic perspective and the prosperity indicators that we use to benchmark this, what we found was it is much more acute in our African American and Hispanic Latino populations. Obviously, the work we're doing to increase inclusivity and belonging within companies benefits employees of all races. So we hope that the work to become a more inclusive workplace has benefits beyond those two populations. But at this point, we are focusing here because of the disparities that exist.
Although, Corry Joe, if I remember right, the 1,200 managers that were surveyed, we have some ethnic breakout in those groups. So we are collecting feedback across the spectrum.
We are collecting feedback and programmatically partnering with organizations like Elevation and others we're not reporting those numbers or collecting that data. That was not the target, but culturally, we haven't excluded any groups. All of their thought leadership and partnership has been included in everything that we're doing.
So a couple other really good questions here. So the list of the rock companies that's available, that's on the website?
It is.
Yep.
Yeah.
So every employer that signed that pledge is on the website. You can find that there. And then if companies signed the pledge post 2018, are they counted in the 2021 numbers, and were their 2018 numbers added to the baseline? And it's a great question. And so for those companies that were original signers of the pledge, their data has been included going back to 2018 through 2021. If a new company came in, let's say in 2019 or 2020, we collected their data going back to 2018. So every company in here has their baseline data from 2018 through 2021, correct?
Correct.
Yep. Really good question. And we're also very direct about this. If companies sign the pledge and don't fulfill the commitment, we address that. So you can't sign up in name only here. You need to sign up and participate on the same basis that everyone is here by sharing your data, participating in the best practices. And so we're also being true to that original commitment.
And Julie, you can back me up on this. I just want to acknowledge the fact that there are so many other communities, chambers that have come to us for just support in similar efforts. And many of them are having they struggle with having companies commit to the transparency that we have in the data. Of course, it's being reported in aggregate, but the fact that every company, 125 companies signed the pledge, committed to sharing their data, I think I took that for granted in the beginning, but as we started to talk to more companies, they're like, how are you getting these companies to be so transparent? And, you know, Julie, you were there from the very beginning. I don't know that there was a ton of pushback. And Tim, from the beginning, I think our community was ready to do this and so serious about it and dedicated to it. You know, I don't want to have this conversation and not make that point. It's a big deal. And I really appreciate it. As a person of color living in this community, I'm really excited about that.
I think that's a great point, Corry Joe. And, you know, you and I have a front row seat to a lot of great work being done. And we've also explored what's being done in other communities. But without being able to put a stake in the ground and measure change and progress against that, you really don't know if you are making progress.
That's great. So I'm going to give folks a minute or so here if they've got additional questions. And while anybody's stewing over those questions or thinking about them, I just want to turn it back again to you, Julie, and then Corry Joe for some closing comments here. There is a question before I go here about maybe some details about efforts in education and supply chain diversity. So I'll take the education question, and Julie tossed the supply chain diversity question to you. So I think we get the perspective that if Milwaukee is going to be a region of choice for all, as you mentioned, Julie, with emphasis on all, employment's an important part about it. So is building diverse businesses and the power of supply chains to do that, which I'm going to let you answer in a minute, but so is preparing the workforce. And when we look at the city of Milwaukee in particular, we have 114,000 K-12 students that receive public funding. I think 1 in 5 of those students is at grade level. Those students, by just pure demographics, are largely students of color, especially Black and brown students. So we have a long ways to go as a community to make sure that those young kids, those students, our future talent pool is at grade level and prepared to go through high school onto a 2 or 4 year institution. And those numbers are daunting. In the city, 69% are graduating from high school, 36% are enrolling in a 2 or 4 year institution, and 6 years later, after high school completion, only 14% have achieved a 2 or 4 year degree. So we have a real challenge in this community with the number of students, particularly Black and brown students, that are entering the workforce prepared again for the opportunities that are here. So MMAC has been engaged for some 30 years in K-12 education because we recognize how important that is. And without going into an even longer answer, our number one legislative priority this session is to make sure that the 45,000 students in the city who are being publicly educated at private school through the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program or in an independent charter school are funded at the same level their peers are in MPS. And we believe MPS could use additional funding per pupil, but there is almost a $7,000 per student gap. And so if every child is equally valuable, then we need to make sure that those children in the schools that they're being educated in have the resources to ensure a quality education. And so we believe that's the most important public policy outcome we could see from the next legislative session and the upcoming budget is for the state to close that gap or significantly close that gap. So we have every child in the city of Milwaukee has the opportunity and the funding to attend a quality school. So there's a lot more that we could do to talk about the education part of this, which is going to be an ongoing and very important part about lifting all talent in Milwaukee. But Julie, as we wrap up, why don't you talk a little bit about the supplier diversity side of this?
Sure. So, much like the disparities that exist on the talent side and the education side, when we look at new business starts, entrepreneurship, as well as companies that actually have employees, Milwaukee ranks very low when it comes to the new business starts for African American and Latino owned businesses. So Milwaukee has its challenges there to work on. And we are more in the early stages of bringing companies together. We have some great examples here in our community, companies like We Energies, Johnson Controls, the Hospital Consortium, that are working every day to increase the number of diverse suppliers that they work with and that supply chain spend. And we have companies that are, as part of their overall commitment to inclusion and diversity, are seeing an opportunity to diversify just the companies that they do business with. So whether that's someone they're hiring to cater a lunch or an accounting firm to work on some professional services, there are opportunities there. So what we see as our role is supporting those efforts by helping bring companies to the table and bring them together. We're looking at expanding through the TBC, their module program that actually does some matchmaking. So looking at the companies and what they have to supply, and then the corporations and the needs that they have. So we're beginning this work, but we see some early promise in being able to share, again, the learnings of some of those companies that are true leaders in this area with those that may be just beginning.
Great. So Corry Jo, I'm going to give you the last word. Why don't you close out with, again, what you see going ahead, some of the challenges and some of the opportunities?
The thing I'm most excited about and what we just reported in these numbers, again, is the power of intention and the collective focus of a community coming together and acknowledging our shortcomings and celebrating all of the opportunity for us to attract and retain and advance talent equitably in our community. It's the future of Milwaukee. It's the future of our lifestyles here and all of our careers. I have kids, 2 little ones that are going to go to Golden Meyer, and every day I look at them and think about what their experience in Milwaukee is going to be. And every day I'm proud of this work and the impact that it's going to have on their lives. So, I mean, I think about it from that viewpoint because I'm looking at them every day, and they are the customer that we're doing this for, and all of their peers of every race. A more equitable, inclusive Milwaukee is better for everybody. Black, white, Hispanic, Latino, AAPI, all of us. So let's just keep pushing together. Let's just keep doing the work. And let's just strengthen the collective.
Great. So Julie, Corry Jo, thank you very much for your leadership on this. I'm going to close out with the words of Wisconsin's new football coach, who said that change is constant, but growth is optional. And growth here is coming because of the intentionality, Corry Jo, that you just identified. And so we're not going to leave that to chance, and we'll continue to focus on this and look forward to reporting out the progress in 23 when we finish out the 22 data. So again, if you're interested, the website's up there. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Apologize for those of you who are looking forward to hearing Dr. Raymond. We may pick him up in the new year. So thanks very much for joining the webinar series over the course of 2022. And we'll be back with you in 2023. Have a good rest of your day.